almost a month now. I first took off for the holidays because they seemed to fall on Fridays this past year. And then I just had terrible technical problems. My internet signal was gone. There was no way I could do this last Friday. So it's good to be back today. And I got two gifts today that made me feel very, very happy. So I don't know what craziness is going to come out of me today. One is I now have an appointment to get the vaccine for the pandemic. And I'm really happy and excited and optimistic about that. By Monday, I will be stabbed in the arm and I'll begin to feel safer than I felt up until now. The second thing was I had my annual visit with my cardiologist virtually today. We did it on Zoom, and she kept shaking her head and saying, "You don't look at all like you're turning 90," she said to me. And then she went over my chart again and some tests I had recently, and she said, "And you have the heart of a 30-year-old," she said. It's really amazing. So I feel on top of the world today. I got nothing but good news and hope for the future. When last we talked, I was in the middle of working my way through a business plan that I had prepared in the late 1980s to help people reconceptualize how they practice, to help them to become much less dependent on insurance companies, and to help them to even get out of the healthcare delivery system entirely and become fee for service providers. And I was through about three-fifths of it when I stopped. So I'm simply going to pick up at that point. I may get finished today, I may not. Let's see, I will now go over and put it up on the screen. There it is. The business plan is on the screen. And I had gotten to a point where I was exploring with my listeners what other things, other than sitting in a room and doing psychotherapy, they might do once they had become licensed. And I had just finished talking about doing outplacement counseling for an American corporation that was in the business of laying off executives. It was a very, very lucrative field to take responsibility for the executives, help them mourn the loss of their jobs, keep them company while they thought of what they were going to do with the rest of their lives, and in general, help them move out of being a member of that corporation into creating a new life for themselves. It's very honorable and creative work, and corporate America will pay very good dollars for people it hires to be outplacement consultants because it spares them having to go through possible wrongful termination suits, which are very, very expensive. We're much less expensive than a high priced lawyer, and we're much more humane than a high priced lawyer. The next thing I want to bring up is any of us can start what I've come to call a distributed employee assistance program resource. And nobody knows what I'm talking about but me at this point, except the one person who was a CSPP graduate who hit upon doing this as a way to accomplish several ends at once. Most large corporations, I think almost all of them, have an employee assistance program. They have come to recognize when they're not downsizing that their employees are important resources to them. And it takes a lot of money to go recruit a replacement and train a replacement if you have to get rid of an employee. So they become concerned about workers becoming depressed, workers becoming not so productive, workers having domestic problems that consume them, and they put employee assistance programs in place. They usually have some counselors that they've hired that try and do a kind of emergency first aid if there's an employer in trouble. And they suggest to their supervisors that if the supervisor has somebody who seems problematic in the work crew, don't just chastise them, send them to the employee assistance program. Well, that's not something that a very small corporation that has maybe 30 employees can afford to have a whole instrumentality, maybe a full-time person who's doing that work, and they fall between the cracks. Then there are some insurance companies that expect the employee assistance program to work partly for them before anybody wants to access a mental health benefit in those companies. The employee assistance program has to evaluate the person and they have to make the referral to the provider that's going to provide the services. So some people have insurance that mandates they come to the attention of employee assistance personnel if they want mental health benefits. All right, my graduate came up with a creative idea. What could he do with mid and small size corporations? And he thought it might be helpful if they had somebody who would come maybe half day a week. And he would set up a consulting firm. He would ask some of his friends to join in. He would try to market this to smaller American corporations in the vicinity and suggest to them they didn't have to be able to afford a full-time division of the corporation that these did these functions. A worker who came part-time once a week might be able to do it for them. And they should name, he would charge them a monthly fee for the service. And they should name the time that the employee assistance person would be on the campus. He would send them somebody who was well licensed and well qualified to do the work. And he was joined by six others. This happened first as a pioneering event down in Irvine in Orange County, California. And it was very successful. And it had wonderful features to it because not only was he doing useful things that were helping to rehabilitate temporarily suffering employees, but he was also richly engaged in the networking he was doing with his colleagues who were helping. He could not make referrals to himself if he happened to be the EAP person that was showing up for company A, but there was no reason he couldn't make referrals if they needed psychotherapy to his other colleagues who were showing up to other companies. So they could refer to each other. That was a lovely benefit. And he also made himself expert on drug programs and other resources that were available, attorneys that specialized in divorce. He was really helpful in times of workers' crises. And I think it's a lovely enterprise. So anybody with a license can start such a thing and try and merchandise it if you have any contacts in the world of American corporations. It's also possible to merchandise oneself as a personal coach for peak performance. These are very words in American corporations these days. They want their top executives to be as effective as possible and to be as free of stress as possible and to be on their game as best as possible. So we're veering over into the non-profession profession of coaching, but there's no reason why any of us cannot say, I am able to help people achieve peak performance. I'm able to help them to manage their stress, reduce the conflicts that are going on in their life, live more effectively, and have that energy available for the workplace while where it's otherwise being drained by personal preoccupations. And I'd like to be available to your personnel. Next, you can get into the workers' compensation system. Uh, that's a very big business. Lawyers make tons of money on workers' compensation claims. They represent the workers who believe they've been injured in the workplace in some way, or some others of them represent the insurance companies who are trying to avoid a payout. And often they need a neutral evaluator who will listen to the kinds of claims the person is making. Is this person really very stressed as a result of what's happened? Has damage or injury been done to the person? Is the person suffering from a diagnosable mental condition because of the workplace, and so on and so forth? And you can be a consultant either on the insurance company side or a consultant on the plaintiff's attorney side and these kinds of actions. Uh, uh, in some ways, this is an easily corrupt profession. If you're going to get hired over and over again and your service is used, you better come up with reports and recommendations that are consistent with the mission of the person who's asked you to come in and do the evaluation. If too many times you tell the lawyer who's representing a client, the damn person you're representing is malingering. This is a ridiculous suit. You shouldn't be pursuing this one. The person doesn't deserve the money. If there are too many clients that you're advocating in that fashion for, you're not going to be brought back. And if you're advocating to the insurance companies, they have a poor case. And if you were to appear as an expert witness, you would destroy their case. This person has been very badly damaged by the work accident that he or she went through. And you repeat that over and over again, you're not going to be very favorably received. So if you're able to tolerate a little bit of corruption, it may be another hobby to pursue. If not, don't go near it. Here's a similar thing. Any of us can become a Social Security disability evaluator. There are a lot of people put on social disability either for a period of time or permanently because supposedly they're suffering from an untreatable or incurable mental defect of some sort or another. It may be lack of intelligence. It may be chronic schizophrenia that's been refractory to anything, and the government has agreed to keep paying Medicare for them and to pay a living stipend to them, whatever. After a while, if the disability has run on for some time, the the Social Security Administration will pick out the file and send it off to an independent evaluator, somebody who's had nothing to do with putting the person on disability and never met the person before. Sometimes the task is a simple one. They will simply send over a file of other people's evaluations, a file of a historical record of what's happened to this person, and ask for a file evaluation and pay a few $100s for you to look at the file and tell them what you think. Should somebody do an in-person evaluation? Is this enough for a recommendation? Or you can become the in-person evaluator who may spend many sessions, do diagnostic work of one sort or another, have tests administered, interview people. It's almost like being a child custody evaluator, gathering data and then making a final recommendation to the Social Security Administrator. It pays pretty well. The last time I looked in on this, I think they pay $120 an hour for the work that they're doing, and you don't have to file any insurance claims or anything like that. They're very prompt about making their payments when you provide them with an invoice. Uh, Next one is to become a Medicare provider itself. I'm no longer recommending this. At the time I had put this business plan together, Medicare was the most liberal health insurance plan available. All you had to do was be licensed, and all you had to do was to get a physician. We're still second class citizens in that arena. You have to get a physician to be your consultant. So you can provide them the name of a physician you will consult with in case you need a medical consultation. And they ask you to agree to accept a fee. All of us are what are called, I forgot what the term, but we agree to accept Medicare's fees in full payment for whatever the services are we're rendering. And their fees, strangely enough, are tied to their zip code. They have done statistical analysis of what our expenses are in various zip codes, what average rates are for rentals, what any help is we might hire, what the salary ranges are for help we might hire, and they queue their reimbursement rates to us based on our zip code. So if you're working in Beverly Hills, interestingly enough, you will get a higher rate of reimbursement than if you're working in downtown Los Angeles. And then they do something else that's interesting. If you go and work in a rural area, they'll give you even more than any of the urban areas because it's hard to get services in rural areas, and they're trying to incentivize more of us to go locate or commute to at least some days a week to rural areas so people in rural areas have access to the kinds of care that we provide. Back then, when I signed up, back then there was hardly any asking for justification or files reviews or attempting to see whether your billing was justified or not. It's become a much more tight-ass and unpleasant system over the years. And I resigned in the early 2000s. I had a second reason for resigning. One of the things I'll be teaching when I'm finished is how to network with and get referrals of more affluent people. So you can be Robin Hood and you can charge much higher fees to affluent people and fund the care of people who could not otherwise afford to see you if you charged everybody the same fee. I consider that's quite a noble thing to do. So I had my share of people over 65 to see. I got really angry after a while because I was limited back then when I was doing it. I was getting $85 an hour from the clients who were on Medicare for each session of psychotherapy. And if I had resigned and stopped doing that, most of the people I was seeing were quite wealthy. I could have gotten $200 or $300 a session for seeing them, and it wouldn't have mattered to them at all. So it began to seem self-defeating. I did what I did with the other Medicare patients who couldn't afford my services without Medicare. I just told them I would charge them whatever I could pay. They could pay. I could charge some of them $5, some of them $25. It didn't matter because I could play Robin Hood with them. Uh, so I wouldn't recommend Medicare anymore. Supposedly, I'm engaged in civil disobedience again. Supposedly, if you opt out, you have to notify them and go through a petition procedure. Supposedly, even if you've never joined up, you're supposed to do that. And I don't know people who do that. Occasionally, if one is really paying attention to all the laws and regulations, one will notify Medicare that you're a licensed psychologist and ask to opt out permanently and file the necessary paperwork. But I don't know how important that is. I don't think they have a lot of Medicare opt out police running around trying to arrest people who haven't opted out. Uh, That's my comments on Medicare. You can become a child custody evaluator. That really is very lucrative work. The colleagues I know who are child custody evaluators make between $200,000 and $300,000 a year if they are busy, but it is very high stress work. Uh, their malpractice rates are much higher than the general malpractice rates for other psychologists in practice. They have to go through very specialized training that the court has organized for them. They do get continuing education credits for them, and they have to be certificated by the court as having received the necessary training to serve the function. And after that, they're dependent on lawyers to choose them to carry out the evaluations. And they're at high risk. The state of California presumes that custody will be shared. Custody is the legal right to make decisions about the welfare of the child. And visitation and residence will be shared as close to 50-50 as possible. So the child is to go back and forth between two houses. If either of the parents wants to protest that they're a better parent and the child should be with them more than with the other parent, or the other parent is really egregious and should have no access to the child at all, they have to file a petition in the court asking for this special treatment of the child or the children if there's more than one. And there's no judge in the state of California, the family courts that I know that would be willing to hold a trial and render a judgment based on an ordinary trial that would be held, with the child being interviewed, the parents being interviewed, any other witnesses that one side or another wanted to bring. They farm this out to the court recognized child custody evaluators. And 99% of the time, the child custody evaluator will spend a lot of time with many people, write a thorough and lengthy report, and finally make a recommendation. And 99% of the time, the recommendation made to the court is the one that the judge will implement. So if you have disgruntled people not liking what you're recommending, and only very wealthy parents can engage in this back and forth and agree to hire a child custody evaluator, they have lots of money. The average cost is about $80,000 to have a fight about custody and visitation. Middle class and working class people can't afford it. The court has a really quick system where they can go and talk to a court employee child custody evaluator who will give them about 4 hours of time to say whatever they're going to say and then make the recommendation to the court. But this is not having a hired expert who spends hours, will spend time with the child, will play with the child if it's a young child, will observe the child at school, will talk to the teacher, teachers, will interview the parents, will come and observe the children at home with each of the parents, will interview friends and relatives of the child, and on and on and on. Now, you have to know that we are, after all, in a capitalist society. So it's in the interest of the child custody evaluator to interview and spend time with lots of people because he or she is running up billable hours. And also, he or she is making a record of being very, very thorough and leaving no stone unturned and reducing the malpractice risk by doing that. So the system colludes to make it more and more expensive with each passing year. But if you have a taste for high stress, uh, a lot of time winding up with somebody whose life you tasted and tasted of, who now hates you and wants you to die and will spend a lot of resources in trying to exterminate you in some way. That's the risk you run, but you will be paid handsomely if you're willing to embrace the risk. So you do need some special qualifications. You have to go through the court's training, but that and your own license is all you need. You can do something related to the family court, however, that doesn't require that you receive any special training. You can start becoming a divorce mediation specialist. You are the person that tries to help people avoid fighting about divorces. Uh, there is a movement now starting in the legal profession called collaborative divorce, where both lawyers agree that they're not going to go to court, and they often want a mental health specialist. They want somebody who understands the mediation process and is committed to trying to keep people out of court. And they simply collaborate with each other. One of us is assigned the father, and one is assigned the other parent, maybe a father if it's a gay couple, or the mother if it's a heterosexual couple, and they try to advocate for whatever seems best in their eyes for their particular client. They argue with each other. They bring in the mediator, and you as the mediator sometimes have sessions with them where you're trying to get them to work together collaboratively to resolve the problem. And you can tell them over and over again, do you want to lose control of this? Do you want some judge arbitrarily just to make decisions about what's going to happen to you or your child? Or you want to keep working at this and see finally, even if you think it's impossible, if you can come up with a solution that you can live with. And as the one who knows something about children, I hope, you can also say you'll be the voice of their child or children. They may come to some decision that they think is very good for the kid, but it's a terrible one. It's a visitation plan that has them bouncing back and forth like ping pong balls and feeling like they have no home anywhere. They may agree that this is just because each of them get 50%, but it's really terrible for the child. So I'm laying out some of the issues you get into, and I consider this very noble work also, if you want to find some time to do this as an adjunct to your profession. Finally, this is noble work too. The LA County Red Cross, as the county Red Cross in every county, has a disaster response team. What happens if the airplane goes down? If the airplane crashes at Lax near a school, and the kids can look out their window and see a fiery airplane crashing. What happens if there's an earthquake? What happens if there's a large fire somewhere? And what happens if there's a riot and the kids are trapped having to watch the riot on television all the time? Sometimes the disaster response teams are called out to deal with the victims of the disaster. And that also is very, very noble work. And the Red Cross will train you how to do that. It's also a good marketing tool for yourself. You will meet lots of your colleagues who are similarly engaged, and you may get some referrals of simpler clients rather than the ones you get as being a member of the disaster response team. So that about exhausts the list of things that I have encountered over the years of my life or thought of that's possible to do once you're licensed that may not be just doing psychotherapy. Uh, oh, I forgot one. You can be a media shrink. That's a good one. If you like being a ham like I do, maybe you could actually get picked up as a commentator for one of the news channels on things psychological. Is Trump deranged, for instance? You could be the expert that talks about whether Trump is deranged, and if so, what kind of derangements. That's a very lucrative thing. You can make a lot of money doing that, and it's fun. Uh, I should add that to this document. All right. I'll see if either of my two colleagues who are listening have some creativity and have something additional to recommend that you consider. But I'm moving to what I consider the thing that's really important to me. I've called it creating at least two symbiotic relationships. What the hell do I mean by that? In the period of time where I was struggling with all this, what's happening in healthcare? How do I get out of the so-called healthcare delivery system? Where is our profession going? Where is there hope for the future? And by the way, I was asked by the board of directors, our centennial year of the American Psychological Association occurred during this period of my career that I'm talking about. And I felt very honored. I was I was asked to give the centennial speech at that convention on the last and future 100 years of American psychology. So I had lots of time to look into my crystal ball and to think about some of the ideas that were crystallizing in me in that decade. Some of them have been incorporated in this document. The one I'm about to reveal was part of my speech. It's about where psychology practice is going to be in the years to come. It will consist of the practitioner having not only one, but I hope two symbiotic relationships. What do I mean by that? Well, in this period of time, a man named George Miller, who I think was a social psychologist, became the elected president of the American Psychological Association. And Dr. Miller, as his acceptance speech, gave a speech that I went to listen to. I often went to hear the acceptance speeches of the new presidents to see what the hell they were going to do with the association. His speech was on the timeliness and utility of beginning to give psychology away. What was he talking about? He said, we had become a mature profession. In the beginning, we were a speculative profession and a profession that liked making hypotheses and talking about things and having debates with each other. We were very much like the early philosophers we had stemmed from. But the scientific method had crept on, and more psychology seemed to be based on reasonable, acceptable, and understandable science. So it was time for us to start giving our knowledge away to the public. We had to find better ways to get the public interested in what we knew and to give it to them. because it would be helpful. We could do great social good if we could give away much of what we had learned. And I got so pissed off and angry, I wanted to storm out of the damn meeting he was saying this in. And he was trying to give practical advices too, many of them from social psychology. I said to some of my friends who were there listening with me, look, we have scars all over our bodies. We've been trying to make a living as psychologists. We haven't wanted to give psychology away. We've wanted to make our careers happen in useful ways, provide useful services, and get a reasonable standard of living by being paid for what we were doing. Why the hell would we give psychology away? That's the best corporate attorney who's presented a dilemma, writing all the briefs and saying what the legal strategy should be and not asking for any payment for that. That sounds insane to me. I'm certainly not going to give psychology away. And then as the next few years went by, I discovered that George Miller was right. And he's absolutely right about what we do, as much as he's right about industrial psychology, social psychology, or the other branches. There is a way we can give psychology away and be rewarded handsomely for giving it away. That way consists of forming symbiotic relationships. I'm talking about having a practice that takes place not only in our offices, but at another site, a site that's not a site where psychologists are. It's a site where other kind of people are addressing human dilemmas. We are going to go off to places where people are in trouble, but it's not places where they would think they should kind of consult with a psychologist. And we're going to show in those places what usefulness a psychologist can be for resolving the dilemmas that they're having that they never defined as being psychological in nature. So here is the technology I developed, and I will make much more clear as in the minutes that follow what I mean by what I just said to you. First of all of you need to take note of what are the zip codes in the rich neighborhoods in your area where your practice is located. I'm sure my two colleagues here could name them pretty easily. They have a good sense of what the zip codes are, where their wealthy clients come from. As a matter of fact, their offices are located in codes where wealthy clients come from. So is mine. Uh, I'm doing this because I would like every psychologist to be civic minded. I'd like you to have a practice that goes on with wealthy people, a good chunk of it. And I would like you to have a symbiotic relationship and a practice that also contains disadvantaged members. And that the second one of your symbiotic relationships should purposely be in a setting where hurting people are showing up and they don't have very much money and you're giving away your psychological wisdom. So we'll start with the rich people because we got to get them into you first. You can't be flexible and give services away and do pro bono work if you're starving yourself. All right. Now, 2B, that was 2A. 2B, from the following list of nodes of life transition challenge or life transition impasse, these are the names I'm giving collectively to the kinds of problems I'm talking about. It's a life transition challenge or a life transition impasse. I'm asking everybody who wants to use this to choose two of those that you have an affinity for, that you're interested in. Maybe you've had many clients who have struggled with these things, so you become more adept at understanding them. Maybe it's a personal issue you've had to struggle with, so you really have an affinity for it. And if you'll start looking on the next page, I can only scroll it. I can't show the whole thing at one time. Oh, I should move it over. I don't know. Yeah, that's better. So I have two columns. On the left side is the name of the transition or the impasse. And the right side, there are gatekeepers running agencies, clinics, sites of one sort or another, where people who are experiencing the distress associated with what I've listed go for help, not to the psychologist. The first one, the first lifespan transition impasse, is the one that happens because life cannot even be created. There's a fertility problem. And people who would like to create life are struggling with that. They're not able to create new life when they want to. So I've labeled that one the infertility adoption dilemma. Who are the gatekeepers? A variety of people, including mainly infertility OBGYNs, ordinary OBGYNs, but they're really jazzy ones who specialize in this. That's all they do with their practice. And of course, there are lots of adoption attorneys that this is the focus of their practice. They help people who want to adopt to navigate their way through the legal thicket. And independent adoption is becoming more and more popular in the United States. They supervise the whole thing. They find the young women. They arrange care for the young women. The independent adoptions are most frequently open. They arrange meetings between the clients and the young women. They're matchmakers. They hope to make a match and that everybody's happy with everybody else, and the adoption comes to fruition and everybody is satisfied. The young woman who has the child feels like she's given the child to parents that are worthwhile, and the parents like the characteristics and the new baby that they're receiving. And by the way, this is typically done on contingencies. So the attorney doesn't get paid unless the attorney succeeds in making the match and it comes to fruition and the baby is placed with the family, or there's no money that comes to the attorney. So everybody in this cycle is a nervous wreck. The expectant parents are a nervous wreck, the lawyer's a nervous wreck, and the pregnant girl is a nervous wreck, to use ordinary parlance. And there's plenty of work for a psychologist to do getting involved in that. Did I want to say any more about that? No, not for the moment. We do have a colleague in Orange County who now has made this not only an adjunct to her practice, working with in tangent with an OBGYN who specializes in infertility, but that's the entirety of her practice. And she's even written a book on the topic. The Psychology of Infertility and Adoption, I think, is the title of the book, or something like that. And so it's a wonderful career that can be built if you listen to me. The second node of transition or node of impasse is the transition to parenthood. This is this is one of the things that's a favorite interest of mine for some reason. Uh, I things that are partly created by our cultural myths. I think I said on an earlier occasion, I am the enemy of our culture. I believe that our cultural teachings and what we absorb as parts of our culture really make our lives miserable often. And this is a good example. There are myths that the expectant couple needs to go through if they're making the transition to parenthood. The most shining myth is that parenthood is wonderful, that this is a blessing they're about to receive, and they should be so excited and so happy that they're pregnant. Uh, Getting pregnant and having a child certainly has a very dark side. It is full of various sorts of unhappiness. For the young woman who's gotten pregnant, well, let me start with things that are shared. There are fears that are shared and maybe not even talked about that the baby is damaged. Now, the testing that's gone on and available now helps, but it doesn't entirely quench it because there's as much testing that can't be done. Somebody has a schizophrenic uncle Are we going to have a kid who's going to turn out to be psychotic? Somebody is alcoholism adopted. There are lots of things that feel aversive to the parents that there are no tests for. Uh, Obvious genetic diseases can be tested for, but more subtle things that are psychological kinds of quote illnesses cannot be tested for, and the parents are frightened. If they have a good relationship, they talk to each other about the fears and they try to comfort each other. But many think that they have to carry the thing stoically in silence from each other. They certainly carry it stoically when they're out socially. Everybody wants them to be beaming with good health and with happiness and with excitement about the birth that's coming and enthusiasm about what they've gotten themselves into. So they're not allowed to talk to their family or to their friends about any kind of internal suffering or distress unless they're very fortunate and they too are willing to be aberrant in the culture. The woman is filled with her own things. Am I going to be tall? Am I going to, what kind of pain am I going to have to go through? Is labor horrible? Is the child going to be born stillborn? Oh, that's a shared one too. Uh, uh, is going to be born without arms? Am I going to have stretch marks forever? Is the birth going to wound me? Am I going to have an episiotomy? Am I going to have an induced pregnancy? Am I going to have a C-section? Uh, is the pain going to be intolerable? Are my breasts going to start sagging afterwards from giving milk? Am I not going to be attractive anymore? Am I going to put on weight? Are my hips going to expand? Am I not going to be attractive to my husband? Is he going to go off and have an affair? He likes me because I'm hot and sensual. Am I going to feel like having any sex for a long time? What is the sleeplessness going to do to me? All kinds of fears and rightful concerns. Sad statistic for my listeners is that about 20% of all men who are becoming first-time fathers go to a prostitute or have a love affair with somebody during the pregnancy. And if that gets discovered by the pregnant wife, so because she's already dealing with her own insecurities, that can be devastating. Some of the most challenging and sad work I've had to do a couple times over all my career. I've had clients in who have been traversing that kind of landscape, and it is really miserable for both of them. The father has to make, oh, the mother also may have lots of morning sickness and be really unhappy. And the statistics and tests would say that the women who have the best hormonal response to having gotten pregnant, the strongest hormonal response, are the ones who are having the worst morning sickness. It's really a good sign that they're probably going to have a very healthy pregnancy. But certainly is a miserable experience to live through. Uh, the woman now starts to leave the intimacy with her husband. Uh, After a while, the baby, she doesn't begin to feel very sensual anymore. The baby becomes eventually a very large watermelon in her belly, and it's even harder to find any position she's comfortable in, let alone any sexual position she's comfortable in. She's also started having a relationship with the fetus. As soon as the fetus starts kicking and she can feel it moving inside her, she begins to develop a fantasy relationship with the new life that's happening. She starts imagining what that person is like. She starts talking to it either openly or in her imagination. When it's kicked, she starts having a conversation with it. What are you trying to tell me? Are you uncomfortable? And by the third trimester, the baby already has kind of a personality, and she's interacting with the baby a lot. And I do believe there is a kind of funny nursing instinct. She gets really preoccupied with what kind of a clothing and equipment do I need to acquire? Where's the baby going to sleep? Do we need a special room? What should we decorate it with? She starts polling others who have had children about such things. And what the husband has to get used to is, without his knowing it or her verbalizing it, he's becoming demoted. He no longer is in her prime secondary position. If he's fortunate, he has been. He is now a caretaker. He exists to support her as she gets through the remains of her pregnancy. He exists to solve practical problems about receiving the baby. And he has to continue to support her after the baby is born. She's going to need even more help from him after the baby is born. And he ain't going to get much from her. He's not going to get much interest. He's not going to get much companionship. He's not going to get much acknowledgement for any stress he's going through. He is going through a partial abandonment during that period of time. So it's not surprising that some men cannot tolerate that very well, and they go and seek sustenance, at least erotic sustenance, from a prostitute or from somebody they pick up who's not a prostitute to get involved with. They can't stand the loneliness, and they're feeling very lonely. They're still in trouble on the other side. Now they have sleeplessness too to put up with. It's not only the wife that's sleepless, it's themselves. And there's not much social communion, sexual communion that goes on between them for months. And so that period of transition is very hard on everybody and has what Jung would call its dark side to it. Where do people struggling with this go to? A variety of places. They go to OBGYNs. They try to talk to them sometimes about their distress. They go to family practitioners if they have family practitioners. They go to go to childbirthing instructors who to at least learn how to manage the day of delivery, and they go to sometimes clergy. Uh, the largest number of persons who had trouble about anything in the research that the Ohio and American Psychological Associations did jointly. The first line of defense, is the priest, the minister, the rabbi. They will go talk to the learned head of the clan or designated significant other of the clan to go talk to. They're still in first place, but they're losing their position rapidly over the decades as they advance. Fewer and fewer people are feeling religious. I've given through two examples. Maybe I'll go on to a third. Early parenting. I started into early parenting. Where do people go? Who are the gatekeepers for early parenting? Mothers often take mommy and me classes. They consult with pediatricians about practical matters of management as well as feeding and vaccines. They may go to family practitioners if they have a family practitioner. They go to nursery school or preschool after a while because that's where their kids are being placed to help raise them. Maybe just daycare, not even a nursery school. If they go to nursery school, there are teachers to talk to about dilemmas with the kids. And there are, of course, clergy again. So I'm not going to go through this whole list now. I'm going to jump ahead. Seems to make more sense to me. What do? You identify two of these kinds of people. Gatekeepers. You need two gatekeepers. Next, here's one that we should be good at as psychologists. Make a thorough literature review of the current state of conceptual and intervention knowledge in the three domains. Yeah, choose three because you're going to make two. I'm sorry, you should choose three. Take three domains and make yourself expert on what the misery is like for the people going through it and what other people have tried to do to help with that misery. Make yourself as expert as possible on the knowledge available about the nature of these areas of turbulence chosen, about factors that exacerbate or mitigate such episodes of human distress, and about intervention strategies needed to be of some help to the persons undergoing episodes of these areas of turbulence. Commit yourself to surveying the literature in developmental psychology, education, psychotherapy, social psychology, sociology, and social work. You can use some keywords in a Google search and see what the literature is available. And any and all of these contain some of the accumulated wisdom about the selected issues. So here we go, name of the domain you've chosen and the date that you finally think you've put together a reasonable literature review and you understand the dilemmas you're going to try to help better than you did before you looked at the literature. 2D, now narrow your three domains down to a preferred two. Throw away one of them, it's too complicated, you're not as interested after looking at it. There's still two that talk to your heart. Within those domains of turbulence, you have to now design a workshop. You are going to give your knowledge away. What you're going to do is you'll see from what I've written here, you're going to design a workshop that has certain characteristics. A, it presents a description of the normative kinds of distress and their sources, typically endured by individuals trapped in such turbulence. Yes, we normalize people's distress. One of the reasons they won't talk about it to anybody is that they think it's shameful, that it runs counter to what they think they should be feeling, or they're afraid of being scolded, or they're just overwhelmed. And you have to normalize it and help them to see that it is to be expected and there are ways of coping with it. And that's what you're there for. Because that's B. It presents helpful suggestions for mitigating the experienced distress. God, this is readable. I keep seeing my colleagues, they're blocking part of it. It presents helpful, it mitigates experienced distress, and it makes helpful recommendations for decisions, actions, exercises, and on that persons in such turbulence can undertake to take control of and finally resolve their plights. It is sprinkled, I bolded this, it is sprinkled with examples of the stories of actual human lives drawn from your practice or your other consultations previously, and illustrations of how your professional ministrations brought useful and effective resolution of the impasse and permitted life to spring forth more freely again. And D, it permits listeners to raise personal questions. You have to let them stop you and say, well, I'm going through this, and what would you suggest for this? Let the listeners raise personal questions, concerns, and uses both your comments and the group process to deliver support. And E contains repeated reminders that you're not charging anything for this. You're making this address to them for as a public service, but if what you're doing in the workshop you're running for them doesn't take care of them, if you're not able to come to solutions, you're available for individual consultations in your practice office. And you'd be happy to have a consultation with them so you could give them more unique and more individualized service. And there will be no charge for that consultation either. Develop finally a handout that contains the salient points you will make with your name, address, and telephone number prominently displayed to be given to each member of the audience to take away after the workshop. Some people are just too shy to talk to you in public while the workshop is running. Some will come up and talk to you afterwards. Others will just not talk to you at all, but they'll be interested. And if you give them some way to contact you, they'll contact you after the workshop. So you are doing two wonderful things at the same time if you develop such a workshop. You are giving away psychology and helping people without charging them, and you're doing case finding. Hopefully, you're identifying and mobilizing some people to come to your practice. And they're coming not because they've read a Psychology Today something, They're coming because they've heard you. They see you as a person with wisdom. They know you're very good with what you're talking to them about. And if anybody can help them, you're the one they would pick because of your perceived expertise about the topic. Okay, develop a title for the workshop and record the date on which the preparation is completed. I'll go one more step. Now it's time to get situated in the on the other premises so you can deliver your workshop. And I don't know in what form the workshop should be. I don't know if it'll be a single presentation, whether it'll be a class with 4 presentations. I don't know how long it should go on. Maybe it should be open ended. You'll become the expert. You'll design the workshop. But the next thing you have to do is identify the gatekeepers. Who is the infertility specialist in my uh, zip code 90403? Who are the glitzy people who practice in this zip code that all the wealthy people have heard on in the rumor mill as the person to go to resolve infertility problem? wrong, wrong choice of dilemma. So develop a list of potential candidates that you might call on. Now you have to make an alliance with them. You have to screw up your courage, even if you're shy, and maybe tell a creative lie. Talk to the receptionist or whoever monitors phone calls and say you have a potential referral to make to so and so. If it's a mommy and me practitioner, you have somebody who needs very sensitive handling, wants to go to a mommy and me class. Could I talk to the teacher who teaches the class? I want to be comfortable and not just make a referral on hearsay. So you're posing as you're going to bring business to that site. Now, most people who are going to be given business will stretch themselves a little to see if they can receive the business. You'll probably get a phone call back from the gatekeeper himself or herself. And then you say the same thing. I want to use you as a referral. I haven't been in practice in the community long enough. I have somebody who needs your services right now, but I might turn into a good referral source. This is not the only client like this that I see. And I want to have some kind of at least personal knowledge of how you function and something of a sense of who you are as a human being. Would you mind if I came by some morning before work? Maybe I could spend 15 or 20 minutes with you and see your setup and get a sense of your philosophy of what you do here. And so I could say that I know you personally when I make the referral. Most people will do that for you. So you're going to meet somebody. Don't ask for anything for yourself. Find out if they have a philosophy of care that they give, if there's anything particularly special or noteworthy about the work they do, where they were trained, what their fee structure is like, what are the insurance plans that they accept if they're over in the healthcare business, and on and on. Just make yourself knowledgeable, and then wait. Within 48 hours, leave a message thanking them. Maybe send them a little gift for taking the time with you. Tell them that you're passing their name on, even though you're lying, and tell them how much you enjoyed the time you spent with them. And you can don't pull at them for any more time. That can be a message conveyed in a voicemail through a receptionist, in a note that you send over, whatever. And then wait a few weeks. After a few weeks, get back in touch with the person. You can ostensibly call and say you'd like to speak to Dr. So and so about whether the referral you made was followed through on or not. Lie again if you have to, but get the person on the phone and say, one of the things you like about your profession is that you're required to do pro bono work. And meeting them really cued you. There is something you've been brooding about. There's something you'd like to do. And you can name the kinds of distress that people who are coming under their care are coming through, and you can tell them something about, I think I've designed a workshop that could help them a lot, and I wouldn't charge. Could you make your caseload available to me? Could I come to your place? And this could just be a service that you offer to anybody who signs up with you. There's no charge for it, but you offer the consulting services of a psychologist who's expert on the distress that is experienced because of the challenge that they're going through, and will give you practical suggestions for managing it. I'd be happy to send you materials I've worked out for the workshop. You can take a look at them, and I'll give you all the credit for doing this. You will have an advantage over your competitors. You will be, in the case of the infertility specialist, the practice that cares. You care not just about the getting them pregnant and the expenses they have to go through. You care about the quality of their life, and you know there's a very high divorce rate in the personnel that you deal with. And this could help mitigate their distress, and you're happy to provide it at no cost to them. So you become actually a consultant in the employ of the worker. You don't become a psychologist in independent practice. One of the reasons you got to visit the site is, do they have a large meeting room or a small auditorium of some kind where you could do the workshops? If they don't, then you have to tell the gatekeeper that you'll be happy to do it at one of the clients' houses. You'll go to the house and all the other clients in the cohort that's moving through their care right now. If they're interested in attending, you'll get in touch with the client they've recommended and see if you can work it out. So there'll be a place to go. You will not bring them to your practice or do anything to interfere with their care with the gatekeeper. All right. I hope if you do these steps that I've laid out, you will be successful in gathering at least one person. Oh, you may discover you don't like the person you're talking to. Then just thank them for their time, and don't try the other step of trying to get involved in a partnership with them. But if you can start that kind of partnership, you may have a lifelong friend. I'm sure you started the partnership because the other person seemed like a good person. You may be developing a social friend, and you may also be getting somebody's going to refer clients to you for years to come. Oh, and I forgot the third thing. The third thing is, if this is a success for both you and the gatekeeper, after a while, you can start saying, I've gotten very, very busy. I don't know if I can afford the time to come here and do this workshop anymore. I'm turning people away from my practice. And you can hint delicately, and the gatekeeper may now start paying you a consulting fee for coming and doing what you've been giving away for free up until then. The gatekeeper may come to value your service and feel you're an integral and very important part of the services being offered at the site. All right, now I will rest and I will finish the other developmental nodes because they're a lead into a whole other topic, the nodes around which workshops can be developed. I will stop the screen sharing and come back to regular session now and open the floor for discussion by anybody that's listening today. Who wants to go first?
Arthur, I had a couple comments of your previous discussion of things that psychologists can do besides psychotherapy.
Right.
And in terms of kind of like working in a disaster response, one thing that usually is taken for granted, and that the work is gratis, and
Absolutely, the work
it's
is gratis.
voluntary. Yeah,
But you're meeting colleagues. This is another way to meet colleagues who would come to think you're a good human being and will make ordinary referrals to you that have nothing to do with the distress of whatever is the crisis.
correct. Yes. Also,
Oh, even nurses and other workers who are part of the disaster team might see you as a good mental health referral source.
yes, yes. Also, in addition, There are many administrative positions that one can hold in clinics, treatment programs, hospitals, schools, state programs, and also, that as a supervisor,
Yeah.
and then as well as a consultant, and then, kind of then the area of executive coaching as well. So
Yes.
there's many.
Yes. Thank you. I thought of ones that would not necessarily, it's hard to be an administrator unless you give up at least most of your practice. I thought of ones that you could do maybe quarter time, maybe only occasionally, and you could make some extra money on the side and not have to sacrifice your practice. That's
Hmm.
mainly what's listed there.
Okay.
Anything else?
Maybe a quick observation just on the that building process. I guess it's good for people to know that many of the things you try won't work. But
Yes.
in my experience and colleagues I've spoken to, that even when sometimes it's only one or two people you meet that almost practically build your practice, especially at the
Yes.
beginning. Yeah.
You must not sell out to despair.
As fun as that might sound.
All right, if we're done, my teaser for the week is I'm going to start into next week by finishing this exercise. I'm starting into my arriving at the realization that what I was had nothing to do with mental health, whatever that was, with diagnostic nomenclature of the American Psychiatric Association, with treating mental illness, or all the boxes that I had trapped myself into and the profession had trapped itself into. What I really was an applied developmental psychologist. That's what I was. And the only set of theoretical notions I started to use were no more about any of the things I had been taught about pathology, throwing everything away and only using fragments of some kind of developmental theory I could find that would explain the phenomena I looked at and what might be useful ways of addressing that phenomenon. It started with the development of this instrument and certainly gathered full force after I started running around teaching this workshop. So that's where we're going next, guys. I may take a pause. It depends on my mood next week because I'm leaving out working with clients a lot. I'm into all kinds of things about the evolution and trajectory of the profession, but I shouldn't let our poor clients go for too long. So I'll see what I feel like next week for sure. Thanks for listening to me today.
Okay.
Have a good week.
You too.
Sounds like a
All
plan.
right. Okay.
Bye.
Bye now.
See you guys.